and welcome to another episode of Stage to Sofa. Today it is my absolute joy to welcome British conductor and coach Paul Wingfield. Now, Paul's work has taken him all over, and he's conducted at the Royal Opera House in London, Opera North, Welsh National Opera, Opera Holland Park and Garsington Opera, to name but a few. He's also got a fabulous career in education. He is leading the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire vocal department as the head of vocal and operatic studies. And I'm so joyous to have you here today. Thank you, Paul, for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Phoebe. It's lovely to see you again, because of course we worked together when you were a student at Birmingham. So it's really nice to be able to make this connection again with you.
Oh, ditto. It was so wonderful. And I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'm just wondering, how now are you coping personally and professionally with this huge transition that we've found ourselves in, with this huge new industry and world that we're all fumbling around trying to maneuver?
It's a big thing, isn't it? And yeah, we're all sort of finding our feet and trying to make this work as best as we can. And I think that the first thing I have to say really is how fortunate I feel to be in post at Birmingham, you know, and feel that I do have a job in music that I can go to and I can feel useful in, and you know, that I can carry on, you know, when I know that there are so many of my friends who are in really, you know, a difficult situation. So I think I feel lucky, number one. And, you know, Royal Birmingham Conservatoire have been fantastic so far at finding a way to make education work face to face, and that's been great. I've been going in quite a lot and doing song classes and coachings and various other things. And we've been doing a lot of, you know, with other places. I did British Youth Opera workshop over the summer. We did that over Zoom. I did some work for Conductor over the summer over Zoom too. And actually, I've got to say that I was surprised by just how well Zoom worked for coachings. You know, I mean, it's of course, you probably had to do a bit of it too, you know, but it's, you know, it surprised me that actually you can still work in a way which is productive, and, you know, and it picks up on things in a far more forensic way, I think, in a way, when you're working on Zoom. And no, I enjoyed it a lot. It takes a lot of energy, doesn't it? But, you know, actually, yeah, it ended up being quite a fun summer in one way or another.
That's so brilliant. That is so brilliant. And I think you're absolutely right. Zoom lessons and online lessons, they take a whole new level of energy. And I've personally done, like you said, a bit of singing teaching as well. But it is interesting. It's like a magnifying glass in certain parts of people's voices and certain things that you see that perhaps you didn't in person. So I fully can relate to that. And I'm really glad you've had such an amazing summer. And I would really like, if I may, to take you back well before you commenced your training at the Guildhall and National Opera Studio. You were a classroom teacher, and I'm wondering how much impact did these years have on the path you then went on to take, and how much do you think it's impacted the artist that you've become?
You have been digging around. Yeah, I was assistant head of music at a little prep school down in Chichester, near Chichester. And I did that as soon as I graduated from my undergraduate days. And I did it, well, for several reasons. One, because I enjoy teaching and still very much enjoy teaching. But also, my wife and I were saving, we're saving to get married. And so it was, you know, it was a good thing to do from that point of view as well. And yeah, I think I've taken those days with me throughout my career so far. So it certainly paid into the way that I approach conducting. It certainly pays into the way that I now approach the job at Birmingham. And I think I've just always been passionate and fascinated with helping people to reach their potential, whatever that potential might be. I find that deeply rewarding. And I think as a conductor anyway, there is, in a way, of course, it's a totally cooperative experience and you're working as part of a team. But those qualities that you learn as a teacher, how to get the best out of people, and how to let people show you their best as well, rather than getting in the way of it. I think those are qualities which, as I say, I've taken with me, and and then at Birmingham as well, yes, all of that leads in. What I feel sort of strongly about, what I feel is a great privilege to have experienced, is the fact that I've taught from year 2 recorders right up to doing stuff at the Opera House, and so from that very those first steps in music right up to the kind of, as I suppose, as good as it gets, really, and that's been really grounding for me. That's really grounding. And I've got to say that, if I were to report on that experience, I'd say that there's less difference between those two things than you might think.
I love that so much. I love that you've gone right from grassroots right to, the top professional level. And it's so amazing. And I think you can learn so much, as you've said, from teaching that recorder class and teaching at the top level. I think it's wonderful.
I think I can still play hot cross buns, just about.
Just about. I love that so much. And this leads me nicely into my next question, Paul. I'm wondering what your childhood looked like in terms of a musical perspective. What do you remember? Can you pinpoint a moment that perhaps you thought, this is what I want to do, and when you fell in love with music and performing?
So I don't come from a musical family at all. I'm half Malaysian, so my mother is Malaysian. She came over here in the 70s to become a nurse, to work for the NHS. And my father's a computer technician, still is a computer technician. And I know that I had a very early interest in music. I had a very early need, I suppose, to move to music. And that would manifest itself in head banging. So I would rock to music and listen to music. My parents didn't know kind of what to make of this at all, and I don't think I would know what to make of it if my children started doing it. Perhaps I'd have a better idea. But it was a kind of strange connection that I had to it, and the need to move to it and sort of feel the pulse of it. And I would listen. I mean, I don't know if it's unusual or not really. I've never considered it, but I used to listen for hours and hours and hours and hours just to music, and usually fast music, and usually classical music as well. Although I wasn't particularly fussy. So there was this sort of this total connection somehow to it, and I would spend hours imagining and daydreaming, I suppose, while I was listening to it, and doing my homework to it as well. But always with the music plugged in. And then I wasn't early starting to play the piano. I think I started when I was 8 or so. But again, that was totally done under my own steam. No one asked me to do it. No one persuaded me that it would be a good thing to do or whatever. I just did it, and I loved it. And I, as a family, we would go occasionally as well to London to watch West End stuff, So I used to love going to Phantom of the Opera. Sadly, no more at the moment. But all of those kind of big shows, I used to love all of that. I think that's how I really got into opera. I mean, I was really, really interested in acting at school as well. So that kind of combination of stage theatre and music, I can trace it right the way back, basically, and I've always found it fascinating. I still find it fascinating to be working with the director and working out how to tie the music together with the drama, which I think is kind of essential for an opera conductor to be able to do. So that's a long answer, I suppose. But
no, that's a fantastic answer, and I love that you were just encapsulated by it from a young age. And also, as coming from someone that's not from a musical family, it is just so nice to hear that you had that organic growth from such a young age, and it grew into this fabulous career that you have now found yourself in. And you've obviously since a little one, you went on to study formally for many years. and you had very many incredible tutors and mentors, and perhaps one of the most notable being Sir Antonio Pappano. How was your time with him, and what was the biggest piece of advice that you took away from your time with him?
I think he's an incredible musician, but also he's got an incredible understanding of a stage and of drama. So I think that that was the number one thing that I took away from him, but also that he is the person who's working hardest in the room. And I think that my work ethic was largely kind of really cemented by that experience of working with him, and seeing that actually if you're going to ask things of other people, you have to be seen to be the person who's really, you know, putting in the effort, you know, and really sweating blood over these things, you know. Maybe that's, you know, but you know what I mean, really working hard, and then you gather an energy around you, and a need for people to, you know, people have a desire then to work hard with you and to create something. So that was massive, really, to get that. And also the fact that I always felt, you know, I mean, I think probably I'm not alone in feeling nervous at playing for Tony the first time I did, you know, but I always felt that he allowed me some creative space as well, you know, to be able to be my own musician. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, there aren't any punches pulled at the Opera House either, you know, and you learn through mistakes as well as through the good stuff you do. But I always felt that there was that space to play, and I mean play not only in terms of playing an instrument, but also play in terms of the bigger sense of the word, you know, and therefore that trust there. And you know, I think finally I always I continue to really respect people who are direct as well, and who just give you very clear information about what they're thinking and what they feel about something, you know. So you always knew if you'd done well or if you'd done less well. And I think that that's something I've taken with me as well, you know, just actually, I always appreciate really just knowing what someone thinks, you know, and through that sort of honesty and that sincerity, you can achieve your potential, I think. So yeah,
That's
those
wonderful.
I've taken away with me. Yeah.
That's so wonderful, and it was such a time of growth, it sounds like, for you. And I'm wondering now, fast forwarding to 2014, when you were just about to leave the Jette Parker program, how did life look for you then, and how did you find that transition, maneuvering that transition from education into professional work full time?
Well, I think the Jette Parker, as it was then, as I believe it is now as well, didn't feel so much like an education as being part of the staff there. I mean, it's kind of straddles the two worlds really, but you feel anyway as though your professional self is being trained by simply being in the situation of having to do, you know, of having to deliver. So I suppose there wasn't such a leap between coming out of that program and then going on to other things. And you know, I still return to the Opera House and do bits and bobs for them in various guises, partly, you know, in their learning and participation department. I've worked quite a lot, but also going back to do things for, you know, offstage conducting or working on the ballet. Even I've done a little bit of that too. So there was always that connection there, which was really helpful actually for a young musician just starting out. But then I went on and started to work for, you know, the small companies around the UK, the bigger companies, you know, Opera North and the others you mentioned, Garsington, some of the summer festivals as well. And it just felt to me actually like a natural progression, as though everything had kind of, you know, that I was ready. I understood what it meant to operate in those different contexts. You know, I sort of felt, I suppose, that there, you know, in that young artist program, you get trained to a kind of gold standard of industry expectations. So it means that you can then be flexible in so many different ways. And now more so than ever, we have to be flexible, of course, you know, and work out how a company works and how and there are very few places where everyone's having a challenging time at the moment, but the smaller companies obviously have much less funding than a place like the Royal Opera House, so you're always having to work with slightly different challenges, and I felt that my training there really prepared me for that, and it was a wonderful time actually, just freelancing around the place, trying out different things, and having my own shows to do, and I was then glad to be able to combine that with stuff in education, stuff at Birmingham, for example, so I could bring what I'd learned from the industry as a relatively young musician, still I hope a relatively young musician, and bring that into education, so I could say, look, I'm not so far ahead of you. I'm probably 10, 15 years ahead of you. The gap is getting larger and larger, of course. But anyway, at the time I was working with you, and to be able to say it is achievable, it is possible, and these are the kind of things that you will be expected to do in the industry as it stands now. And I think actually to have the ability to be able to say to students, this is what it looks like now, rather than this is what it looked like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. I think that's kind of vital. And
Definitely.
I always felt that was the offer, so.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like it was such a magical place for you in terms of learning and growth and development, and to be able to pass that on to people of the next generation is just such a wonderful and rewarding thing. And I'm wondering, you have conducted so many wonderful performances, which I have also been witness to a few of those. What performance stands out to you as the most memorable in your memory? And what one would you go back to in a heartbeat if you could relive it again? What would it be and why?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I'm not sure I could say, Phoebe. I mean, I think that I like to live in the future, I think, and I like to invest myself into whatever project I'm doing, and at whatever level that project's happening at, so, and I fall in love with whatever that is. And I love that process. I love the fact that I wouldn't choose to listen to bel canto. I hope I'm allowed to say that, but I wouldn't choose to listen to it. In fact, I probably wouldn't choose to listen to opera so much anymore. But when I'm working on it, when I'm working on a specific piece, the kind of love and the passion that you feel for a piece, I think is kind of overwhelming. And, you can really, really get your hands dirty in something. That's such a kind of satisfying process for me. So with bel canto, for example, actually realizing, working on it, that this is more than just, what I thought it was. Actually, there is total drama in this, and total, and I mean that was a penny that dropped quite a while ago, I should say. But even so, I do remember it sort of suddenly realizing, actually, I really, really enjoy working on this stuff. I feel I've got something to say, and I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a Baroque specialist by any stretch of the imagination, but one kind of great thing about being at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire is that, as well as doing the stuff I do outside, I can try things that I wouldn't expect to be employed for. So we did The Enchanted Island, which BYO, British Youth Opera, had done a couple of years ago, and the Met had done Jeremy Sams, this kind of pasticcio opera, lots of different Baroque arias all stitched together into a kind of mashup of Tempest and The Midsummer Night's Dream. So we did that in an old button factory in the jewellery quarter in Birmingham, and that was just before lockdown. And Baroque music is not something that really I would touch. I feel like I love it. I totally love it. But I just feel, that it's something that I'm not a specialist in. But having the chance to do that at Birmingham was such a wonderful thing, because you suddenly realise, God, actually, I do have loads to say about this stuff. And actually, I think it all aligns with stuff that specialists would say, So, through the work at Birmingham, and through they basically, the conservatoire work and the professional work kind of pay into one another the whole time. So the most important thing to me is that you feel as a person as though you're always growing, always learning. And where better place to do that than at a conservatoire, albeit as head of department. But I have no problem in admitting, I'm not even admitting, in saying that I am learning at the same time, you know, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
It is a wonderful thing, and it's so amazing to hear your passion for, you know, music that, like you said, you perhaps wouldn't have done in another setting, or perhaps wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. It's just so fascinating that these opportunities are all linking into each other. And I'm wondering now, what is your go-to process in preparing a performance? What is your process? How does it look? And maybe what's your favourite part of that process?
There's a kind of pain barrier to break through, I think, with opera, you know, that, or certainly for me there is, that, you know, it's that picking up, you know, the Bärenreiter there, you know, or the Strauss score or whatever it is, and going, okay, there's a lot to do here, you know. And I think the most satisfying thing is slowly breaking that down, and slowly understanding, I get how A leads into B, and how this stitches to this and this to this, you know. And there are things, and I would say this to students as well, there are points about school preparation that you simply cannot bypass, that you just cannot skip over, even though it may seem as though you can. So, you know, writing in translations, that is something that I have to do as much as any student, you know, but also sitting down and playing it through, because I, you know, after all, I trained as a repetiteur. Even if I play a little bit less these days, you know, just being able to sit down and play and sing it through actually is so important. It's not to say that I don't listen to things as well. I do, and I think that people can. I don't think there's a problem with that, as long as you keep kind of critically focused and you sort of say, okay, that was that, but let's have a listen to it. Have a broad kind of range of listening, so you can go, you know, I kind of agree with this, and I agree with this in parts, and this is what I think it should be like. I think the problem is occasionally with students is that you know, the scope isn't wide enough, you know. So, and then it's so easy to take on bad, or to mimic someone else, which isn't particularly helpful. So that certainly forms part of it as well. Reading the text through, discussing the text, you know, and then when you get into the rehearsal room, that whole process of collaboration, working with a conductor, working with singers to, you know, what the hell is this bit about? Why does Figaro say this to Susanna? Or I just can't get this line. I just don't get it. How do we unpick this? All of that stuff is totally fascinating for me, you know. And then, you know, the kind of the best bit, I suppose, is, because that was part of your question, is saying, okay, so there's a forte marking in the score here. That's great. But why? You know, why is the count suddenly marked like this? What does that say about his psychology? Forgetting the music, what is it? How do we tie that to human psychology and human drama? You know, and I think that's totally fascinating. And I think if students get that, if they get the fact that they don't just have to deliver a crescendo or forte piano, whatever it is, a rallentando, if they understand that the game that you have to play is to go, that is there because the character is feeling like this, then, you know, a whole universe opens up to you, you know, and the whole thing kind of becomes simpler in a way as well. So
I love that.
Yeah,
That is so. No, it's very, very, very true. And you're right. A whole universe does open up when things align, and suddenly there's a reason for that note, or there's a reason for that relationship between the note and the word. It's really, really interesting. And thank you for sharing that process with us. It sounds like you have a very fabulous, in-depth understanding, which you obviously do, of how to get your process across to your students, as well as going through it yourself, which is just such an incredible skill. And again, it brings me nicely to my next question, which I wanted to fast forward to 2017, where you were appointed as we've been speaking about, head of vocal department at the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. I'm wondering, what made you take this opportunity at the point you were at then, and how has it impacted on your life today?
Well, I suppose I never thought I'd get the job. I should say that to begin with. And I think I've just always been I've always found teaching really energizing. I've always been really passionate about it. And I love seeing students understand something for the first time, or understand a way of working, or the fact that it's not as complicated as they might think it is. In fact, my whole kind of idea behind teaching is that actually it takes really, well, the greatest teachers I had ask the simplest questions. And I think if you can give yourself permission to ask those simple questions, and find the simple answers, and I'm not saying any of that is easy, by the way, but you know, if you can get to that point, then you're on the right road, you know. So yeah, with the Birmingham job, I was always fascinated with teaching. I was really passionate about it. You know, I mean, life takes you on strange ways, doesn't it? And you know, my wife and I were considering families, and you know, and how that might. We now got 2 kids, and that's wonderful, and we're very very happy. And I think at the time I just thought, you know what, if I could balance these 2 things, you know, if I could make this work, because I couldn't do anything without. I need to be a performer, but I need to be a teacher as well. Those 2 things are kind of non-negotiable, really, in my life. You know, I have to find space for both of those things, which doesn't make things easy always. But there is a kind of vocational quality, I think, to that side of my life as well. You know, and at the point, yeah, we were starting to think about a family, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just not sure I want to be away so much. Whilst they're young, you know, and it came up, and it all kind of works out.
The rest is history. The rest is history. It's so wonderful. And that actually was going to be my next point, is you have such a beautiful young family, and you've also got this incredibly fantastic, successful portfolio career, which is so well established. And I'm wondering, how do you balance your personal life with your professional life? How do you find that balance between the 2?
I've got a very forgiving wife.
I love that.
we make things work. Yeah, it's not always easy. It wouldn't be easy. And you know, my wife Emily as well is you know, has a career as an academic, and both as a teacher, but also in writing books and her research. And so there are pressures on both of us, and it's just about that give and take and that compromise and understanding. I think that, you know, that sometimes you just got to do your best. And I think when you have kids as well, you sort of suddenly realize, you know what, I can probably do what would have taken me half a day in about an hour if I really focus down into it. It's a bit like, you know, I sort of feel with conducting, you know, you have to have a really good memory, because you run something and you have to go bang, bang, bang. These are the things I need to fix. And I think that kind of focus that you train yourself into as a conductor ends up being quite useful as a parent, you know, and as a working parent, because you can go, okay, I've got, you know, I can shut myself in the bedroom for, yeah, I've got half an hour now. Okay, so if I get this done and this done and this done, then I'll feel as though I've achieved something. And I think one gets very good at being very efficient with things, you know, and realizing actually, if you get those things done, you know, it will be fine. The sky won't fall in, and you know. So yeah, we make it work. We make it work, and as I say, you know, at the moment, and with so many of my friends, I just feel grateful that you know, I've got the chance to do that, and to be able to go somewhere for work each day, not only for work but also for work as a musician. You know.
Definitely. Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and it sounds like you've got a real teamwork thing going at home, so I'm glad to hear that as well. And I'm just thinking now, you are, as we've mentioned, you're a very established point in your career, and you're still so young, and I'm wondering, where do you see yourself, Paul, in 5 years from now? Where would you like to be 5 years on?
Oh, it's $1 million question, isn't it? That's a very good question, Phoebe. I'm not sure about the answer, but what I do know is that I think that this sounds like a cop out, but I think that life has this way of working itself out, you know, and I just sort of feel everything has kind of slotted into place um, for a reason, or for a, you know, it just feels that always in hindsight you can go back and go, God, that makes sense. I'm not sure I could have done that any other way. And so I don't know where I'll be, but I hope that I'm combining all of these things, that kind of make me a musician, make me the musician, or make me the person I am, really. Yeah, and we'll see. I just think it's important, particularly at the moment, to kind of enjoy what you're doing, the present. Because somehow I think if you're enjoying that work in the present, that things just kind of reveal themselves. So I invest myself totally into whatever I'm doing now, and enjoy doing that totally, and just watch how things what happens next, I suppose.
How it unfolds. Yeah, no, I'm fully for that. That's not a cop out. That I absolutely agree with that. I think you just don't know, do you? It is a different question. Some people have that vision, but I think you're right. It does just unfold, and different paths lead you down different, journeys, and you find yourself where you are. So I fully am with you for that.
I think your what you say there about vision, having a vision, like having a vision for a department, or having a vision for for your career or whatever. I think that's so important. Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I read something on Facebook the other day, which is kind of a bit corny, but I thought, what, actually that's really, really helpful. And it was that the success doesn't lead to happiness, but happiness leads to success. And I kind of think I think that's so true, actually. I think that if you are grounded and happy in what you're doing in your personal life, particularly in your personal life, but in your professional life as well, if you're getting real reward, or real, really being nourished by what you're doing, then I think that is success, and will lead to success. And I think too often one has to remind students, or that actually they mustn't pursue this idea unquestioningly. It's much more important that they sort out that support network around them, that they feel looked after. Because as soon as you've got that, you can kind of do things. You feel like you've got the power to do things.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're very much right on that. And it actually also leads nicely into this next point that I have written down, which is you've been quoted to say that your vision for the vocal department at Royal Birmingham Conservatoire centres around communication, community, and collaboration. And I'm wondering, how important do you feel it is, not just implementing those things into your vocal department at Birmingham, but also implementing these values into our industry moving forwards as a whole? How important do you think they are for our industry?
Yeah, I mean, so totally essential. Funnily enough, I haven't heard those 3 C's since I went for the job. So you've reminded me of that. Oh, thank God! I think I've delivered on those, actually. So far, so good. But I haven't heard that for a few years. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So community for me is a huge priority for the department. So I make it my business to make sure I know everyone's name. I know little about them, what they would like me to know about them. And there is that sense that people are known, and that I, as head of department, understand where their potential might lead them, and that can be different, obviously, for every person in the department. And I think actually it's when you've got the ability to have a department as intimate as ours. I mean, there's still about 70 students, but you get to know them all. It means that you can really kind of create a bespoke education for them, and I think that's essential. Really essential. And the same is true, absolutely, in the industry. And collaboration, of course. And I think that of course, opera as an art form is by its very nature, it's a collaborative art form. That's given, But I think it is, or certainly before COVID, it was spreading its wings wider and wider and wider. So, for example, with other art forms, and even that kind of the boundaries between music theatre and opera, it wasn't so much a case of 2 separate camps anymore. There's much more a sense of collaboration to what can we learn from them, what can they learn from us. I mean, I think it's got to be the starting point. It's got to be the starting point. So no, I'm glad you remind me of those.
The 3 C's, I love that.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to see that. As I say, if people feel that things are going well in Birmingham, I'm totally delighted. But it's about having that sort of that vision, I think, you know, and kind of always sticking to where you want things to go, you know, and if you've got that, and if you can hold on to it, then I don't think you can go far wrong.
That's such wonderful golden advice. Thank you, Paul. That's honestly really, really helpful to so many instrumentalists, singers and conductors who will be thinking quite heavily about how to maneuver through the next few months, years in this new world we find ourselves in. Do you have any advice to them on how would you maneuver at the age they're at, say at the start of their journeys? How would have you maneuvered this time in their shoes?
I think one's got to put a bit of a hard hat on and think about things practically. You know, I would. That's where I'd want to start. So we don't know how this is going to pan out. We don't know what things are going to look like in a year's time. But what I'd want to know, if I were in their position, is that I had something, whatever that is. I had something that was going to pay the bills, so that when things settle down again, and as it will, and things open up again as they will, you have the resource behind you, the practical resource to be able to invest your energy. You, as a musician, you know, it's kind of half of the course that you will have to do something to make ends meet, you know, and you know, we encourage at Birmingham, as I'm sure they do at most conservatoires, this portfolio career where you're happy in any number of different contexts, you know, but it might be that you just simply have to work in a totally different area just for the time being. That doesn't mean you give up your integrity as a musician, I don't think, you know, and it gives you the space, and what you need at the moment is the space to be able to carry on working by yourself, or you know, however, but until such a time as things open up again, and so I think it would be practical advice like that, really, you know, to say that really how am I going to make this work? How can I do this? How can I simplify this down into what I need to do to pay the bills? Because ultimately, you know, we all have bills to pay. I'd also say, I think that if you're a student and you're still at Conservatoire, you have the luxury of being in an institution where you can focus simply on, you know, on your learning. You have the luxury of time to plan for next year. So don't waste that time. Use it to go, okay, so I think I need to get this job or a job which will help me then just relax and give me some breathing space. So if you are, you know, if anyone listening to this and you are in an institution at the moment, it's a golden opportunity, you know, because there are so many professionals who are in a really tricky situation at the moment, who do, you know, have much less breathing space, basically. So use the time well. Use it, and who knows how it's going to...
Exactly. No, that's great advice as well. It's so true. And absolutely, with those students that are still there, use that time. Paul is absolutely right. I can speak from experience of that too. So I'm thinking now, Paul, you've been through so much as a musician, as an educator, and you are at this point that we've talked about where you're very established, you're really at the peak of your career. And I wonder what obstacles you've had to face to get to that point, if there have been any.
Yeah, I mean, obstacles. I suppose so I had a health scare when I was still training, and I was diagnosed with cancer. It was, you know, it was dealt with very quickly and swiftly. It caught early, the rest of it. And I suppose that is something I'm very happy to share, because I feel that actually that also informed who I now am, and it made me realize that things can change very quickly, you know, and you can have the rug pulled from under your feet very quickly. Again, I was still training, so I was able to, you know, I was in that position I was just talking about, you know, where I had the luxury to kind of plan, you know, a little bit. But that was, I suppose, in terms of obstacles I faced, I suppose that was that was the biggest one. But you know, it gave me that time, and I always remind myself now of that time. You know, if the going gets tough, I just think, you know, actually things have been really tough. You know, and it was never life-threateningly serious, but serious enough for me to have to take a year out for chemotherapy and the rest of it. You know, and that was enough for me to realise, actually, you know, you don't know what's going to be around the next corner, which is why I think I have this kind of mentality that you just invest in the thing that you're doing now, you know, and make the very, very most of it. You know? Yeah, and that experience, as you know, I'm sure, as with lots of people who have been through similar things, has certainly informed my life as a musician. Yeah, and as a person, of course. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. That is so moving, and I'm so glad to hear that you came out the other side so wonderfully, and that it's created you into the person that you are today, and it's added to that. And it must have been a terrifying time to get through, but it shows your strength of character in how you have come out of the other side of it. Well done. We've come to our final question now, Paul. We've had such a lovely chat, and I don't want to stop talking because you've got so much wisdom to give, and I know this is going to help so many people, so thank you. But my final question to you is, what piece of advice would you give to an 18-year-old Paul?
I knew you were going to ask that one. What one thing would I say? I think I've got lots of things I would say, but you know, I just think that your whole your career as a musician, you know, if that's what you want to do, begins before you've even thought about careers, really. You know, it begins in that total connection to music and to being moved by music and feeling something that's impossible to articulate, I think, with music. And I think it's just important to hold on to that, to always know that if you've got that connection, that's a very, very good sign in my books, you know. And it's about, as I said, that kind of that singular vision, you know, of knowing that this is how I feel about this. This is what I feel I need to impart or I need to do with this, you know, and using that energy. I talk to my students all the time about energy, you know, giving people energy. And, you know, I think it's so important that there are, you know, some people who have this sort of ability to take energy away, you know, and I always, I find that terribly upsetting. You know, it's so important, you know, that one is able to be able to give, you know. I think that in terms of, one can have a kind of energy and a will towards something happening, or, you know, towards a goal, you know. And I think that it's important to be in touch with that side of things, you know, and to never let that go. Whatever other things, you know, you might have to do around that, just make sure that you continue to interrogate and question that small part inside of you, which, you know, is the reason why all of this ever began, you know. And as I say, I think I just don't think anyone could ever question that then. You know.
Oh, I love that. I'd love to hear you saying that to your 18-year-old self. I think they would be very, very happy with that piece of golden advice again. Thank you so much, Paul. You've been such a joy. Thank you so much for joining me on Stage to Sofa.
It's been my total pleasure, Phoebe. And it's just been a great privilege to be able to catch up with you after, you know, after so many years.
Ditto.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to do this. Thank you.